this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful Florida. And today our question comes to us from STBI 92. And STBI 92 has this question. What period in human history do I find most interesting and do I most like to study? And the answer to that is ancient Egypt. I became interested in ancient Egypt as a very small child, starting around the age of 3 or 4. And long before I knew how to read and write, I was devouring everything I could find on the subject of ancient Egypt. Among other things, it's how I became interested in horror films, because the first ones I encountered were the Mummy series from the 1930s and 40s. And I originally watched them because of the segment set in ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt has been a passion of mine through my whole life, and I've done a great deal of study on it, and I find it informs a great many of my ideas and belief systems. I also, because I've studied it so extensively, know that a great deal of variation exists within this subject based on geography and time period, and it's very hard to make blanket statements about ancient Egypt outside of a very small number. For the most part, you have to consider the time period you're talking about, the location you're talking about, and the people you're talking about in order to have a truly accurate idea, insofar as we even can have an accurate idea. And this is why when I wrote my novel, I wrote this novel as opposed to any other novel I might have written, because I wanted to set it in ancient Egypt, which I knew a great deal about. And they always say you should write about what you know, and that was the first thing that occurred to me. And I had a great time writing it. I think that it was very interesting to have to consider the subject from the perspective of people's everyday lives. Granted, we were talking about relatively upper class people, but still, usually when people think of ancient Egypt, they're thinking of the royalty, not the ordinary people, but the ordinary people are just as interesting. Now, having said all of this, I think that when people have a fixation on an ancient culture, it is past life and origin, that they have past lives there, that they've either drawn over into this one because they were so good, or because they have unfinished business, or both. And occasionally because they were so bad, although they would have different feelings about it in that case. So I would say to you, whoever you may be, that if you have a fixation on an ancient culture or a different culture than the one that you yourself live in, you probably should consider doing some meditative and past life work regarding it to see what you will find, because I think you almost certainly will find something. Now, in my life, I've also gone on to be interested in virtually every culture and every time period, because I find the varieties of human life to be fascinating. Recently, I watched the Russian television series Sophia, which is about pre-Tsarist Russia, and shows life at that time in considerable detail, which I assume to be accurate. It certainly is accurate based on what I already knew about it, but I thought it was very interesting to see pre-Tsarist Russia through Russian eyes. I also enjoy studying about ancient China, the ancient Near East, Greece and Rome, and pre-Columbian Americas. Pretty much anything I find interesting. And I find it most interesting through the eyes of the people of the time. And I think one reason that many people don't like history is that it's often approached through dates and events rather than people. But if you study the people, they're fascinating, as people always are, and generally speaking, not that terribly different from ourselves. There may be differences, but the similarities far outweigh them. So I strongly recommend, if you want to study history, that you do it in this very personal way, because I think you'll understand it better. And you'll still get the events, but you'll have an emotional connection to them, which I think is very helpful in understanding them. So that would be my answer. I hope you find it helpful, and until next time, may you blessed be. Please join me for our Correllian Peace Prayer. I pray for peace. I pray for love. I pray for stability. I pray for the nation where I live. I pray for the world. Reverend Don, super omnibus of incantations and invocations for all occasions. Mary Ann Kay and I created this massive compendium of magic and artwork for you to use in any way that you would like. There are literally hundreds of spells and hundreds of illustrations, which can be mixed and matched and used in many different ways. Check it out now at witchghoulstore.com.